Hi there, welcome to BizTalk. I'm Mikhail Raj. Today we touch on the possible impact of the US-China trade war on Malaysia. And Malaysia being a small export-oriented economy, there is no doubt that we will take a hit. What choice do we have? Play safe and watch the two giants slug it out? Or do we have a game plan in action to counter the effects of what is surely going to be a costly trade war? The full details on BizTalk. Welcome back for an insight into the US-China trade war, which only seems to be worsening. We have in the studio Samirul Arif Osman. He's the Senior Research Officer at the Malaysian Institute of Economic Research. Samirul, welcome to the studio. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Okay, Samirul, head on. Question is, how serious would be the implications of the tit-for-tat trade war between US and China? It started in July last year, and especially for Malaysia, is this something that Malaysia should be very deeply concerned about?
Yeah, from my point of view, it's serious because if you see, in terms of production of economic growth, economic output in the world, the United States produces about 25% of the world economic output, and China about 15%. So combined, that is about 40% of the world economic output. Malaysia, on the other hand, produces about 0.4% or 1/100th of the combined output of both countries. But also, if you see, both the United States and China are our major trading partners. You see, China is both in terms of export and import. That is trade lah. And actually now we run a deficit with China. So who are our biggest trading partners now? It's China, Singapore, the European Union, and Japan, and United States of America. But 15 years ago, actually America was our biggest trading partner.
So what happened over the past 15 years?
If you see the numbers, they have reverse roles. China they almost have reverse roles. And the other thing I wanted to add was, in terms of trade, both China and United States is about 25% of our import and export. That is trade.
Maybe because, do you think that the US has underestimated China's economic powers or prowess? And is it justified for the US to see China as a threat?
I will get into that maybe a bit later, but first I just want to talk more about the economics, and then I will. That's more like a political economic angle. So, what do we export and what do we import from China is actually E&E. Electronics and
electrical items,
electronic items and electrical products. And you see, when we export to China, China also exports to America. And so if America puts a barrier to entry of Chinese products, so our sale to China will also be affected. So our export is more or less contingent to whether the Americans can buy Chinese products.
That has been debated about how vulnerable will be, because both countries, as you said, are major trading partners and quite major investors in Malaysia. So, but the question that we have to ask ourselves is whether Malaysia has a game plan or an action plan to cushion the impact of this trade war.
Okay, yes. Okay, now you see there are two things we can do. One is we diversify our markets. And in the long term, we have to strengthen our competitiveness. Now, how do you diversify your markets? Is you develop economic partnerships. Now, RCEP is one example, regional comprehensive economic partnership. Yes, so it's basically between ASEAN and 6 other countries, which they have trade agreements with, and the 6 countries are Japan, South Korea, China, India, Australia, New Zealand. America is not in this configuration, this RCEP configuration. There's another one last time, TPP, but now there's no more TPP, there's CP, TPP, successor. When you establish economic partnerships, you want to establish partnerships with markets that can buy your products, you know. You just don't establish partnerships for the sake of establishing partnerships. It won't be very wise economically.
I see. But talking about some of the game plan and cushion the impact, there have been opinions put forward on import substitution. They say that must Malaysia push to take advantage of China's possible move to look for alternative imports, for instance, in the area of vegetable oil, soybean. You see, they might have to reduce the import of soybean from the United States, and can palm oil as also a competitive vegetable oil fill that gap?
Well, the way I see it is that this is actually we call this trade diversion. You see, so basically, United States will not import from China, and they will import from other countries, Malaysia presumably, and vice versa. China will not import from the US. They will import from other countries such as Malaysia, for example Malaysia. This is called trade diversion. But if you do economic simulation, you find that the advantages of trade diversion will be outweighed or by the damage done by a trade war. Yes, the benefits is little. So I want to say how we, in the beginning, how we affected is through trade diversion. The other one is through global value chains, and I will get into that. What do I mean by global value chains?
Okay, indeed, Samirul, global value chains, and also I want to ask you about trade diversion you talked about, and also later when I come back from the break, I want to talk about trade in diversion of investments and all that. But hold your thoughts. We'll take a short break here, and we'll be back after these messages. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking about the US-China trade war and the impact on Malaysia. Samirul, one of the issues you are talking about the trade redirection and investment redirection is that one of the issues is that the issue of content is that Malaysia's exports have very high import content, and then that means our factories are involved in very low assembly work rather than high-end manufacturing activities. So how do you relate this to import substitution on palm oil or electronics, or what do we need to do to get them going, to really get going, you know?
Yes, okay, so that's good. You talk about palm oil and E&E, electronics and electronic products. So there's a stark difference between the two. But first of all, in the case of palm oil, if there is increased demand, you can always create the supply. The demand, it's demand driven. And we can open more land, and we have world-class research institutes for palm oil. Now, I said there's a stark difference between E&E and palm oil. So calculations have shown that for every ringgit of palm oil we export, the value addition to the economy is greater than when you compare for every ringgit of E&E you export. What goes back to the economy, there's this thing called value added multiplier. But okay, so this is a very interesting situation because palm oil is low tech, yet it creates a lot of value. On the other hand, E&E is high tech, but it is low value added.
So which means basically you're trying to say let's push palm oil to the hilt, is it?
Can also, but also what I'm saying is that we should improve our efficiency and our skill level so that we can make the most of E&E and not just do assembly work.
That means you are talking about value added, upgrading our manufactured final products and all that. No?
Correct.
Okay, basically, the question is Malaysia well placed to be a beneficiary of these investments? You know, we already have investments, but we also got a lot of competitors in the region. So what if there is a redirection of investments from China or any other country? Are we well placed to receive them?
Actually, how much we benefit depends on whether we are ready to take benefit to make gains, because one is value creation, the other one is value capturing. So we are involved in value creation, no doubt, but how much value can we capture? So I give you an example. There's this iPad I have with me. So many its production network is all over the world, and Malaysia is probably in the network too. But how much or what kind of products do we contribute in the making of this? This may be 5,000 ringgit, but how much did we contribute? 10%, 20%? And that's the thing that we should be concerned about.
Our returns are quite low when you talk about the economies.
We have to look, that will relate to the skill level and how much, I mean, I want to introduce this term in international Hertzsche-Ohlin model, actually, and basically they talk about labor and capital. So what they find is that for lesser developed countries, it's labor intensive, but for developed countries, it is capital intensive. And usually when it is capital intensive, you also have high skilled labor involved in the process, and that is what I'm trying to arrive at. Of course, the other thing is in the case of E&E, ownership is mainly for foreigners. In the case of palm oil, is local players, but that is ownership. But we're talking about long term, and this can only happen if you have a skilled workforce.
I see.
And that, yes.
Well, that will take a long time anyway. But then the other thing is that Samuel said, do you think Asian countries might look more to China because of they are playing a greater dominating role in the global economy, and because America seems to be losing its economic dominance, and also is the US justified in having a trade war with China or looking to China as a threat? You know.
Yeah, okay. Actually, in the case of Malaysia, it already happened, because I think in 2004, our exports to US was about 20%, and by 2014, it probably dropped to 8.2. On the other hand, the imports from our trade with China increased 2.5-fold. So it's almost reversal of role.
But that's trade, right?
That's trade, yes. Okay. So we are talking about now alignment of a small state like Malaysia. So how do we align ourselves to make the most of such volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous situation? I say we should be friends with all and make the most of the situation, and that can only happen if we have a resilient economy, a well-trained workforce.
Okay, the other thing is that there could be more opportunities in China, so Malaysia could be wanting to be part of the supply chain to China rather than the United States, because you're talking about electronics and parts and assembly things and all that. Is that true?
But being involved in trade is one thing, but also in the past, when you see in terms of technology transfer, we seem to benefit a lot from American presence, probably Japanese too. but I'm not sure about China. So it goes back to at what level are we of the value capture we are at.
Yeah, because it has been reported that when we have investments from Japan and China and Japan and the United States, there is technology transfer, like you said. But in China, it's more like import and export. There's no real transfer of technology. And I think Dr. Mahathir was in Japan recently. I think he's in Japan right now. And then I think the main aim is that to sort of attract possibly another wave of Japanese investments. So what do you think?
Yeah, okay. That's a welcome idea because, now back to international trade. Last time the Ricardian we call. So last time it made sense for Japan to export automobile, for example, and for Malaysia to export rubber because of a comparative advantage. But now the idea now is we have regional production networks and production fragmentation, where there's unbundling of the manufacturing process. So the car that comes from Japan will have parts made in other parts of the world, and that would include Malaysia too. So that is what we should be looking at.
Okay, I think a lot more to talk about this, Samirul, but we'll not discuss more about this Malaysia's preparedness. But we will take a short break, and we'll be back after these messages. Don't go away. Welcome back. Samirul, a question on when you talk about international trade and politics, is there still an avenue for a negotiated solution to find a common ground between these two giants? And a related question is about the World Trade Organization. What are they doing? They seem to be in a state of semi-paralysis. They don't seem to want to get involved between Beijing and Washington, to bring them both to the negotiating table.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this issue up. Actually, I wrote an op-ed on this 2 years ago. I said, don't abandon the WTO, just fix it. Yeah, so the criticism of the WTO is its dispute settlement body. And so we can see why what appears to be a paralysis or inaction or whatever. So actually, at the conclusion of the Second World War, they wanted to set two institutions were set up, IMF and World Bank. But the one on trade, which was supposed to be International Trade Organization, it took a long time for that to come an agreement. Only a decade later did it become WTO. And part of the reason is how they're going to do all this dispute settlement and all that. They haven't really figured that out.
But I think they had a tough time because they were GATT before and they became WTO. But right now, what they might be dealing with are two superpowers.
Correct.
And is there a scenario, a case where Washington is actually ignoring the WTO completely?
Yeah, I think both want to reshape the WTO in its own mold, you can say. And so, but no. The other thing is there was a lot of FTAs, and then there were bilateral agreements. So WTO has to monitor all of this and come up with some stand.
But you mentioned about the RCEP also. Just like to ask you, what is the progress update of the RCEP?
I think Malaysia has stated that very interested to participate in the RCEP.
Okay, but how long will it take to actually?
I'm not sure about the timeline. No.
Okay, question about Malaysia is that has no choice but to liberalize further incentives to boost exports and rewrite investment guidelines to attract companies wanting to relocate out of China. So, do you think that Malaysia needs to rewrite its investment guidelines?
Yeah, so one of the criticisms is that there's massive involvement of there's a heavy involvement of government in business and crowding out through the form of GLCs.
Yeah.
So and the Pakatan government is closely looking at this. They will say that GLCs they're going to study the role of GLCs and all that. So I think this issue will be addressed and will become more attractive. Yeah.
Okay.
There will be no more crowding out of investments.
Okay, but from your observation, who do you think will win the trade war?
I think nobody will win from the trade war. Everybody will lose.
It will be a costly war that everybody will lose out.
It will be costly.
When you're talking about a scenario that everybody will lose out, what kind of scenario are you looking at?
Well, actually, if you see IMF and World Bank, they have reduced their growth numbers.
Okay. Now, what are the repercussions when the growth is coming down? Okay, for example, on Malaysia, what are we talking about?
Yeah, because Malaysia is a open economy, highly interconnected to the global economy, and trade as a percentage, I think you wanted to ask that, trade as a percentage of GDP is 130%. The world average is around 60%. Although 15 years ago is as high as 200%, and Singapore now is around 200%. But the thing is, so any shocks in the trading in the international system, be it through price fluctuations, commodities, or trade war, will adversely impact us.
Yeah.
Because we are a small open economy.
So even the bigger danger is that we know that tariffs are undesirable, and tariffs will obviously drive up business costs in the United States and in China. Even they are telling the US companies are now paying for the increased tariffs. One of the issues that for Malaysia, will it drive some companies out of business?
Yeah, I think that might happen.
How soon are you talking about? In what way? I mean,
I don't have exact data on that.
But what kind of companies do you think the export-oriented companies will be really affected?
Yeah, most probably. Yeah.
Like when you're talking about electronics, ours is really electronics, exports, semiconductors, and all that. Do you think that will really take a hit?
It could, because it's our major export to China.
Okay.
And yeah, both in terms of import and export.
Yeah, but
and like I said, the export of our export to China is contingent whether China can export to the US.
Yes, but what about the fact that some of them say that Malaysia seems to have the best buffer against a trade war because it's backed up by the crude oil and crude palm oil prices and all that. Will that be an effective buffer against any downturn?
Yeah, okay. So that's a good question. If you see our balance of payment, our current account is positive.
Yeah.
It has been positive, although the net current account balance is a bit shrinking, but it's still positive.
Yeah.
And although our fiscal position is negative, so all these years since Merdeka, we have never defaulted on any loans, and our balance of payment is always positive. Now, when IMF comes to any country, Article 4 consultations, the first thing they will look is whether your current account balance and your balance of payment, is it positive or not?
Okay.
If that is, then you are in serious trouble. And we have been positive all along. We export goods. It's just through services where that causes it to shrink.
Okay, that's good news, Samirul. Anyway, thank you, Samirul, for that insight into the trade war. I really hope some rational minds will prevail in Washington and Beijing to come to amicable agreement. So anyway, this has been Biz Talk. Until the next time, bye for now.